Marcus Chen stared at the massive shipping container that had just been delivered to his remote Montana ranch. The thing was easily the size of a small house, gleaming with alien metallurgy that seemed to shift colors in the afternoon sunlight. According to the delivery manifest, this was his mail-order bride, a transaction he'd drunkenly completed 6 months ago during a particularly lonely night after his divorce. He'd assumed it was some elaborate scam. The Galactic Bride Registry had seemed too fantastical to be real, despite the legitimate-looking certificates and the hefty down payment they'd required. But here it was, humming with strange energy and bearing shipping labels in 3 different alien scripts. The container's seals hissed open with a sound like steam escaping from a massive pressure cooker. Marcus stepped back as a wave of frigid air rolled out, carrying scents he couldn't identify, something like ozone mixed with exotic spices and an underlying metallic tang that made his teeth ache. What emerged was not what he'd expected. She was colossal, easily 12 feet tall, with skin that seemed to be carved from living obsidian. Her limbs were impossibly long and graceful, ending in hands that could palm a basketball with room to spare. But it was her face that stopped Marcus cold, ancient beyond measure, with eyes like twin stars and features that spoke of terrible wisdom and unimaginable power. This was no ordinary alien female looking for a human husband. This was something that belonged in the darkest folklore of a dozen worlds. She collapsed the moment she fully emerged from the container, her massive form hitting the ground with an impact that shook the earth beneath Marcus's feet. That's when he saw the wounds, massive gashes across her torso that leaked a silver fluid that hissed when it touched the ground. Burns covered her arms in intricate patterns that almost looked like writing. "Jesus Christ," Marcus muttered, his shock overriding his fear. Whatever this being was, she was dying right in front of him. He rushed to his barn and returned with every medical supply he could find, knowing they'd be woefully inadequate. As he approached, her eyes opened, not the star-bright orbs he'd glimpsed before, but something dimmer, pained, almost human in their vulnerability. "You are the one called Marcus Chen," she said, her voice like grinding millstones, each word requiring obvious effort. "I am YAGA Blackwood, of the 13th Coven of the Outer Dark. I have traveled far to reach you." Marcus knelt beside her, his hands shaking as he tried to assess her injuries. The silver blood was unlike anything he'd ever seen, seeming to move with a life of its own. "I'm going to help you, okay? Just hang on." Her laugh was bitter and echoed strangely in the empty space around them. "Help? You do not understand what I am, human, what I have done, what follows in my wake." But Marcus was already working, using every bit of veterinary knowledge he'd picked up during his years ranching. The wounds were unlike anything in any medical textbook, but trauma was trauma, and stopping bleeding was a universal principle. He worked with gauze and bandages and antiseptic, while she watched him with growing amazement. "Why?" she asked after an hour of his ministrations had stabilized the worst of the damage. "You know nothing of me. I could be a threat to your entire species." Marcus sat back on his heels, exhausted. His shirt was soaked with sweat and silver blood. "Maybe you are, but you're also hurt and alone, and I've got medical supplies. Everything else can wait." Something shifted in her cosmic gaze. "You are not what I expected from the registry files." "Yeah, well, you're not exactly what I ordered either," Marcus said with a tired grin. "But we work with what we've got, right?" Over the next 3 days, Marcus learned that YAGA Blackwood was nothing like the simple alien bride he'd thought he was purchasing. She was a being of immense power, feared across multiple galaxies. Her ship, disguised as a shipping container, was actually a technology so advanced it made Earth's best science fiction look primitive. She could manipulate matter at the molecular level, had lived for millennia, and possessed knowledge that could revolutionize or destroy entire civilizations. The registry, she explained on the third evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset, is not what it appears. It is a sanctuary network, hidden within the commerce of flesh and loneliness. We are refugees, Marcus, those of us with powers too great for our own worlds to contain. Marcus handed her a beer, which she examined with scientific curiosity before taking a careful sip. Refugees from what? From the hegemony, the galactic government that rules through fear and demands absolute conformity. They hunt beings like me, those they call aberrants, and either enslave us for their armies or destroy us entirely. She touched the burns on her arms. These are hegemony tracking burns. They found me 3 systems away and nearly captured me. I chose the registry as my escape. And you ended up with a divorced rancher in Montana, Marcus said. That's got to be disappointing. Yaga's laugh was different now, warmer, more genuinely amused. On the contrary, in 3 days you have shown me more kindness than I received in 3 centuries of serving the Coven. You ask for nothing, expect nothing, and yet you freely give what you can. Marcus felt heat creeping up his neck. It's just basic human decency. Basic human decency, she repeated thoughtfully. Is this common among your species? More common than you might think. We've got our problems, sure, but most people will help if they can. That night, Marcus woke to find Yaga standing in his field, her form silhouetted against the stars. She was completely healed now, her skin gleaming like polished stone in the moonlight. She was speaking in a language that sounded like distant thunder and cosmic wind, her hands weaving patterns in the air that left trails of light. When she finished, she turned to find him watching. I was speaking to the refugees, she said. There are others hidden throughout your galaxy, scattered among the lesser civilizations. I have told them of Earth, of humans like you. Probably a good idea to keep us a secret, Marcus said. We're not exactly ready for galactic politics. Yaga's expression grew troubled. I fear it may be too late for secrets. My escape has drawn attention. Hegemony scouts will follow my trail eventually. She paused, studying his face in the dim light. When they come, they will not distinguish between refugee and harborer. Earth will be classified as an aberrant sanctuary world. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. What does that mean? Complete sterilization. Every living thing on your planet burned away, and the world itself marked as a cautionary tale. Her voice was steady, but he could see pain in her ancient eyes. I should leave. Take my ship and lead them away. No, Marcus said without hesitation. Marcus, no. You don't get to sacrifice yourself for us, and you don't get to make decisions about Earth without talking to Earth first. He ran his hand through his hair, thinking. How long do we have? Months, perhaps. The hegemony is vast but slow. They will send scouts first, then assessment teams, then the war fleets if they determine Earth is truly compromised. Marcus nodded slowly. Then we'd better start making some calls. The next morning, Marcus began what he would later think of as the most important series of phone calls in human history. He started with his brother David, a general in the Air Force, who initially thought Marcus was having some kind of breakdown. It wasn't until Yaga demonstrated her ability to lift Marcus's entire house into the air with a gesture that David began to take the situation seriously. Within 48 hours, Marcus's ranch was crawling with military personnel, scientists, and government officials. Yaga handled the attention with impressive patience, answering questions about galactic civilization, hegemony military capabilities, and the nature of aberrant powers with the thoroughness of someone who had lived through centuries of warfare. Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenobiologist leading the scientific team, was particularly fascinated by YAGA's molecular manipulation abilities. "This is beyond anything we've theorized," she told Marcus during a brief break. "She's essentially a living nanotechnology factory. The applications for medicine, engineering, space travel." "Yeah, and that's exactly why the hegemony wants to control beings like her," Marcus replied. "They're not just hunting refugees. They're eliminating competition." General Morrison, the military liaison, was more focused on defensive capabilities. "If what she's telling us about hegemony fleet strength is accurate, we couldn't fight them conventionally even if we had 100 years to prepare." "So we don't fight them conventionally," Marcus said. "We do what humans do best." "Which is?" "We get creative, we adapt, and we refuse to give up." By the end of the week, word of YAGA's presence had spread through the hidden refugee network. Other aliens began arriving on Earth, not through official channels, but through the same underground railroad that had brought YAGA, a shapeshifter who had been posing as a businessman in Hong Kong, a psychic entity that had been hiding in the Amazon rainforest, a gravity manipulator who had been working as a street performer in Berlin. Each brought their own story of persecution and their own unique abilities. More importantly, they brought intelligence about hegemony weaknesses and the true scope of the galactic situation. "The hegemony claims to rule in the name of order and peace," YAGA explained to the assembled human leadership in an emergency session at the Pentagon. "But they are parasites. They identify civilizations with useful capabilities, conquer them, and then drain their resources and knowledge while claiming to bring them civilization." "How many worlds?" asked Secretary of Defense Williams. "Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands. They have been expanding for millennia, and they never leave surviving populations that might remember what was taken." YAGA's expression was grim. "They call it the Greater Peace." President Martinez leaned forward. "And they're coming here because of you?" "They are coming here because Earth has been identified as an aberrant sanctuary. I am simply the excuse they needed." YAGA met the president's gaze steadily. "But I have learned something in my time here that changes everything." "What's that?" "Humanity is not like the other species they have conquered. You are naturally aberrant. Every single one of you." The room fell silent. "Explain," the president said quietly. "Your species exhibits collective abilities that the hegemony classifies as dangerous anomalies: rapid technological advancement, social adaptation, creative problem-solving under pressure. Most importantly, you naturally form cooperative networks that transcend genetic and cultural boundaries." YAGA gestured to the mixed human and alien group around the table. "You have accepted refugee aberrants not out of calculation but from instinct. This is unheard of in galactic civilization." Dr. Kim spoke up. "Are you saying we're all latently psychic or something?" "I am saying your entire species functions as a single, distributed intelligence network when properly motivated. You share information instantaneously across your world. You coordinate responses to global challenges within days or weeks. You adapt technologies and strategies at unprecedented speeds." YAGA paused. "The hegemony has never encountered anything like you. Their standard conquest protocols will fail." General Morrison looked skeptical. "That sounds pretty optimistic for a species they're planning to sterilize." "It is not optimism," YAGA said. "It is recognition. I have spent 8 days among you, and I have seen what you are capable of. More importantly, I have felt it." She touched her chest, where Marcus's bandages had saved her life. "You made me remember what it felt like to have hope." As the meeting broke up and officials scattered to begin the enormous task of preparing Earth for its first contact war, Marcus found himself walking with YAGA across the White House lawn. Despite everything that had happened, he still couldn't quite believe this was his life now. "Regrets?" YAGA asked, apparently reading his expression. "About answering that drunken mail-order bride ad?" Marcus considered it. "No, but I have to ask, Was any of it real? The registry, the bride service, any of it? YAGA stopped walking and turned to face him. The registry is real, but not as advertised. It is a desperate measure, matching refugees with beings from species that might show them kindness rather than exploitation. She reached out and took his hand, her massive fingers incredibly gentle. As for the rest, I chose you specifically, Marcus Chen. Your profile indicated exactly the type of person I hoped to find. Someone who would help without expecting payment, who would show kindness to a stranger, who would choose compassion over fear. Marcus felt his throat tighten. And you exceeded every expectation. You saved my life, gave me hope, and now you have changed the course of galactic history. Her smile was radiant. If that is not real, I do not know what reality means anymore. The first hegemony scout ship arrived 3 weeks later, just as YAGA had predicted. It appeared in Earth's outer solar system with a flash of exotic energy and began broadcasting demands for immediate surrender and planetary inspection in 17 different languages. It was met by a response that no hegemony scout had ever received before, an invitation to dinner. Marcus stood in the White House Situation Room, watching the live feed from the hastily constructed orbital platform where first contact negotiations were taking place. YAGA was beside him, along with the other refugees who had made Earth their sanctuary. The human delegation was led by President Martinez herself, backed by the most diverse group of advisors ever assembled. You realize, the scout commander was saying, his translator making his confusion audible, that this world has been classified as an aberrant sanctuary. Standard protocol demands immediate sterilization. Standard protocol, President Martinez replied calmly, assumes that harboring refugees is a crime. We operate under different assumptions here. The hegemony brings order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. The hegemony, interrupted Dr. Kim, who had become humanity's leading expert on galactic politics in the past month, conquers and enslaves and calls it peace. We've heard this song before. The scout commander's mandibles clicked in what the translation software identified as aggressive posturing. You cannot stand against the might of the hegemony. Your technology is primitive, your military laughable. Our technology is human, said General Morrison, which means it's designed by creatures who think suffering is unacceptable and problems exist to be solved. He smiled. Want to see? What followed was a demonstration that no galactic civilization had ever witnessed. In 3 weeks, humanity had not only mastered the basics of aberrant abilities through working with their refugee guests, but had begun integrating those abilities with human technology in ways that defied every known principle of galactic engineering. Gravity manipulation combined with human material science to create ships that could change their mass at will. Molecular manipulation merged with human manufacturing to produce self-repairing adaptive weapons systems. Most importantly, human networking capabilities enhanced with aberrant mental powers had created a communication and coordination system that operated faster than anything the hegemony had ever encountered. The scout ship found itself surrounded by a fleet that had literally been constructed in the time it took to reach Earth, using technologies that shouldn't have been possible and tactics that made no sense according to established galactic military doctrine. This is impossible, the scout commander transmitted. You have had contact with our technology for less than one of your planetary rotations. 26 days, President Martinez corrected, which is about 25 days more than we needed. She paused. Would you like to surrender now, or should we show you what we built yesterday? Back on Earth, Marcus watched the standoff with a mixture of pride and terror. Think it'll work? The bluff? YAGA smiled. It is not a bluff. Your species has accomplished in 1 month what typically takes civilizations centuries. The hegemony has no protocols for this situation. What happens if they decide to fight anyway? Then they learn what happens when predators encounter a species that refuses to be prey. The scout ship's response came after 6 hours of apparent deliberation. A request for negotiation protocols and formal diplomatic contact procedures. It was the first time in galactic history that the hegemony had asked to negotiate rather than demanded submission. The galaxy was about to learn why humans had survived every extinction event their planet had ever thrown at them, and why the word impossible had never been part of their vocabulary when it really mattered. The negotiations lasted 3 days and fundamentally changed everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. The hegemony scout commander, who introduced himself as Primary Assessor Vorthak, had never encountered a species that treated first contact as a social event rather than a surrender ceremony. President Martinez had insisted the talks be held over meals, with representatives from every Earth nation present alongside the refugee aberrants. Vorthak found himself seated between a shapeshifter from the Andromeda Spiral and a gravity manipulator who kept unconsciously making the salt shakers float. The culture shock was visible in every one of his 4 eyes. "This is highly irregular," Vorthak kept repeating as humans served him foods that somehow perfectly matched his species' dietary requirements. "The protocols clearly state that primitive worlds are to be assessed for resource potential and population management needs." "Your protocols," said Secretary of State Chen, no relation to Marcus despite what the media kept suggesting, "assume that intelligence and civilization are the same thing. We've learned they're not." Dr. Kim had spent the past month studying hegemony history through the refugees' memories and testimonies. What she'd discovered painted a picture of galactic civilization that was both more advanced and more stagnant than anyone had imagined. "The hegemony has controlled galactic development for over 10,000 years, she explained to Vorthak, who was struggling with the concept of explaining rather than commanding. In that time, their technology has barely advanced. Their social structures haven't changed at all. They've achieved stability through stagnation." "Stability is the highest virtue," Vorthak responded automatically. "Chaos breeds suffering." "Change breeds growth," replied Dr. Kim. "Suffering comes from refusing to adapt when circumstances require it." The real revelation came on the second day, when YAGA finally revealed the true reason the hegemony hunted aberrants with such desperate intensity. "They are afraid," she told the assembled delegations. "Not of our powers, but of what we represent." Marcus, who had been included in the negotiations despite his complete lack of diplomatic experience, "You're the one who started this whole thing," President Martinez had said, leaned forward. "Which is evolution. The hegemony achieved their current form approximately 12,000 years ago and has spent the intervening time ensuring that no species under their control develops beyond that point. They call it maintaining order, but it is actually preventing competition." Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what the translation software labeled as distress. "The greater peace requires that all citizens develop according to approved parameters." "The greater peace," interrupted the shapeshifter, whose human name was David Liu, "requires that nobody ever become powerful enough to challenge hegemony supremacy. Every aberrant ability, every technological breakthrough that they can't control, every social innovation that might inspire independence, it all gets classified as dangerous and eliminated." "This is propaganda. This is mathematics," said Dr. Kim, pulling up holographic displays that made Vorthak flinch. "We've analyzed the development patterns of every world in your historical records. Civilizations consistently reach a certain threshold and then mysteriously stagnate or disappear. Always just below the level of hegemony technology, always just before they might pose a threat." Marcus watched Vorthak process this information and saw something he hadn't expected. Genuine shock. "You didn't know, did you?" The protocols exist for the benefit of all galactic citizens." "The protocols exist to maintain hegemony dominance," said YAGA gently. You are not evil, primary assessor. You are simply a tool of a system designed to prevent the galaxy from ever moving beyond a single species' vision of perfection. That night, Marcus found Vorthak standing alone on the observation deck of the orbital platform, staring out at Earth's night side. The alien's 4 arms were wrapped around himself in what looked like a protective gesture. "Regrets?" Marcus asked, echoing the question YAGA had asked him weeks earlier. Vorthak's translator took a moment to process the nuance. "I have served the greater peace for 47 of your years. I believed I was bringing order to chaos, civilization to barbarism." He gestured toward the planet below. "Your species has achieved in weeks what my people insisted was impossible for any civilization." "Maybe impossible isn't the right word," Marcus said. "Maybe they just didn't want anyone else to try. The refugees' testimonies, if they are accurate..." Vorthak turned to look at Marcus with all 4 eyes. "How many civilizations have we? How many species?" Marcus didn't have an answer for that. Nobody did. The true scale of what the hegemony had done over 10 millennia was too large to comprehend. On the 3rd day, everything changed. The negotiations were interrupted by an emergency alert from Earth's newly constructed deep space monitoring network. A massive hegemony fleet had entered the outer solar system. Not scouts this time, but a full invasion force designed to sterilize entire star systems. "They're not here to negotiate," General Morrison said as tactical displays filled the situation room. "That's a cleansing fleet." Vorthak stared at the displays in obvious horror. This cannot be approved protocol. A single world with no space-based infrastructure. Why would they send a level 7 response force?" "Because," said YAGA quietly, "someone in the hegemony hierarchy understands what Earth really represents." The fleet commander's communication came through on all frequencies simultaneously. "I am Fleet Admiral Zakros of the Hegemony 3rd Battle Group. This system has been classified as a Class 5 aberrant infestation. All inhabitants have 47 hours to evacuate before full sterilization protocols are implemented. This is the only warning you will receive." President Martinez looked around the room at the assembled human and alien representatives. "Options? We can't fight that," General Morrison said bluntly. "Even with everything we've built, that's 300 capital ships designed to crack planets. Our entire defensive fleet is maybe 20 vessels." "Evacuation is impossible," added Secretary Chen. 7 billion people in 47 hours? "Surrender?" suggested someone from the back of the room. "Surrender means slavery for our refugees and slavery for any human who shows aberrant potential," Dr. Kim pointed out. "Which, according to YAGA, is all of us." Marcus found himself thinking about the past month, about YAGA bleeding silver in his field, about the refugee network that had trusted Earth enough to come here, about humanity's response to being told they were about to die. "What if we don't fight the fleet?" he said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at him. "What if we fight the system instead?" Dr. Kim caught on first. "The refugee network. If Earth falls, where do the other hidden aberrants go?" "They don't," said David Liu. "They get hunted down one by one just like before." "Unless," Marcus continued, "we make it impossible to hunt them." Yaga's eyes began to glow with something that might have been hope. "You are thinking like humans again." "I'm thinking like someone who grew up hearing stories about David and Goliath," Marcus replied. "You don't beat overwhelming force with more force. You beat it by changing the rules of the game." The plan that emerged over the next 6 hours was completely insane by any reasonable standard of galactic warfare. It was also completely human in its audacious refusal to accept the limitations that everyone else considered absolute. Instead of preparing for a doomed last stand, Earth's combined human and alien technical teams began working on something that no civilization had ever attempted: a simultaneous broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy. "The technology exists," YAGA explained as the plan took shape. "The hegemony uses it for their administrative communications, but they've never had to defend against someone using their own network against them." "Can we really reach every world?" asked President Martinez. "Every world connected to the hegemony communication grid," said Dr. Kim, "which is essentially all of them. The question is whether we can get the message through before they cut us off." The message itself was Marcus's idea, inspired by something YAGA had said during their first conversation, that humanity's greatest strength was their natural ability to form cooperative networks with anyone who needed help. The broadcast would contain everything Earth had learned about the hegemony's true nature, along with detailed technical specifications for every advancement humanity had made in the past month. More importantly, it would include an invitation. "We're going to tell the entire galaxy that Earth is open to refugees," Marcus explained to the assembled world leaders. "Not just aberrants, but anyone who wants to live free." "That's suicide," General Morrison pointed out. "Even if the fleet doesn't destroy us, we'd be flooded with billions of refugees." "Unless," said YAGA, "we offer them something better than refuge." "Which is?" "Revolution." The 47 hours passed faster than anyone expected. Earth's orbital defenses had grown from 20 ships to nearly 50 as manufacturing facilities that shouldn't have been possible continued producing vessels with capabilities that violated known physics. But even 50 ships were nothing against a hegemony-cleansing fleet. Marcus spent the last hours before the deadline at his ranch, which had somehow become the unofficial headquarters for refugee affairs, despite being thousands of miles from any government center. YAGA was with him, along with dozens of other refugee aberrants who had chosen to make their stand on the world that had offered them hope. "Any second thoughts?" YAGA asked as they watched the sunset from his porch. "About falling in love with a 12-foot-tall alien witch who's helped start a galactic war?" Marcus grinned. "Nope. You?" "About trusting my life to a human who answered a mail-order bride advertisement while drunk?" YAGA's laugh was warm. "Never." The broadcast began at exactly 46 hours and 30 minutes into the deadline. Earth's hastily constructed hyperspace transmitters pushed the signal through every hegemony communication relay simultaneously using override codes that the refugee network had been secretly gathering for centuries. The message was simple. "This is Earth. We are under attack by the hegemony for the crime of helping refugees. We invite you to learn the truth about galactic civilization and join us in changing it. Freedom is not a crime. Growth is not a sin. And nobody has the right to tell an entire galaxy that it cannot evolve." The technical specifications followed. Detailed instructions for every innovation humanity had developed, freely shared with anyone who wanted them. Gravity manipulation, molecular engineering, quantum communication networks, technologies that could revolutionize civilizations overnight. But it was the final part of the message that changed everything. "The hegemony claims they rule for peace and order," President Martinez's voice carried across the galaxy. "But peace without freedom is slavery, and order without growth is death. Earth offers you a different choice. Come to us not as subjects or refugees, but as partners in building something new. Together, we can create a galaxy where no one has to hide their potential, where no species has to stagnate to survive, where the future belongs to everyone willing to reach for it." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Uprisings began on 17 worlds within the first hour. Government officials on dozens of hegemony member worlds publicly announced their support for Earth's message. Most crucially, 3 entire hegemony fleets declared their intent to defect rather than continue enforcing policies they now understood were designed to prevent galactic evolution. Fleet Admiral Zekros found his fleet surrounded not by Earth's pitiful defenses, but by former hegemony vessels crewed by beings who had decided that freedom was worth fighting for. The communication came from the flagship of the defecting vessels. Admiral, this is Captain Thelen of the former hegemony vessel Inevitable Victory. Now serving the Free Galaxy Coalition, we demand that you withdraw your forces and acknowledge Earth's sovereignty. This is mutiny, Zakros replied. Treason against the greater peace. This is evolution, came the response. And it cannot be stopped. Marcus watched the standoff from his ranch, surrounded by humans and aliens who had become family over the past incredible month. Orbital displays showed fleets facing off across the solar system while billions of beings across the galaxy chose sides in a conflict that would determine the future of civilization itself. Think it'll work? He asked YAGA. Look around, she replied, gesturing to the mixed group on his porch. It already has. The revolution had begun not with weapons or grand strategies, but with a simple recognition that helping strangers was not a crime, that growth was not a sin, and that the future belonged to anyone brave enough to reach for it. Earth had offered the galaxy a choice between stagnation and evolution. The galaxy was choosing evolution. Fleet Admiral Zakros, faced with the defection of half his force and uprisings across dozens of worlds, made the only choice available to someone who had spent his entire life believing in the greater peace. He ordered the attack on Earth to proceed with whatever vessels remained loyal. The battle for Earth's freedom was about to begin, but it would not be the last battle of the war that followed. It would not even be the most important one. It would simply be the battle that proved to a watching galaxy that sometimes the strongest force in the universe is a species that refuses to give up on hope. The battle for Earth's freedom lasted 18 hours and redefined the nature of warfare in galactic civilization. Fleet Admiral Zakros had begun with 137 loyal ships, expecting to face a primitive world with minimal defenses. Instead, he found himself fighting an enemy that seemed to rewrite the laws of physics in real time. Marcus watched the battle from the emergency command center that had been hastily constructed beneath his ranch. It still struck him as surreal that the fate of galactic civilization was being coordinated from a basement in Montana, but humanity had never been much for conventional thinking. Earth Defense Fleet is reporting impossible readings, General Morrison announced, his voice tight with disbelief. The refugee ships aren't just fighting alongside our vessels. They're somehow sharing capabilities instantaneously. On the tactical displays, human ships equipped with refugee-enhanced technology were performing maneuvers that should have torn them apart. Meanwhile, alien vessels operated by refugee crews were demonstrating human-inspired tactical innovations that made no sense according to established military doctrine. It is the network effect, YAGA explained, her massive form hunched over a communication console that looked like a toy in her hands. Your species' natural ability to form cooperative links, enhanced by aberrant mental capabilities. Each ship can access the knowledge and abilities of every other ship in real time. That's... Dr. Kim paused, calculating. That's not just technological integration. That's evolutionary leap. The battle raged across the solar system as hegemony forces found themselves outmaneuvered by an enemy that learned and adapted faster than their tactical computers could process. Ships that should have been destroyed instead regenerated damage using molecular manipulation techniques shared across the fleet network. Weapons that should have been impossible fired energy beams that bent around obstacles using gravity manipulation borrowed from alien crew members light years away. But the real turning point came when Primary Assessor Vorthok, who had remained on Earth throughout the crisis, made a choice that surprised everyone, including himself. I am broadcasting on all hegemony command frequencies, he announced suddenly. This is Primary Assessor Vorthak, identification code Theta 77 Alpha. I am declaring this assessment mission complete with a recommendation for immediate cessation of hostilities. Fleet Admiral Zakros's response came through with barely controlled fury. Primary Assessor, you are in violation of direct orders from the High Command. Withdraw your recommendation immediately. Negative, Fleet Admiral. My assessment indicates that this world represents a beneficial evolutionary development rather than an aberrant threat. Continuation of sterilization protocols will result in unnecessary loss of hegemony resources with no strategic benefit. Marcus looked at Vorthak with new respect. You realize you just committed career suicide, right? Vorthak's 4 eyes met his gaze steadily. I realize I chose truth over protocol. It is a very human decision. The broadcast had an immediate effect on the battle. Nearly a quarter of Zakros's remaining ships ceased fire and requested new orders. The admiral found himself commanding a fleet that was rapidly diminishing as more crews questioned the purpose of destroying a world that had offered freedom to the galaxy. But Zakros was a creature of the system that had created him. Rather than adapt to changing circumstances, he ordered his remaining loyal ships to implement scorched earth protocols. If I cannot cleanse this world through conventional means, his transmission rang across the battle space, I will use quantum demolition charges to destabilize the star itself. The entire system will be eliminated. The threat sent ice through every human heart and sparked desperate fury in their alien allies. Quantum demolition was a weapon banned throughout galactic civilization. It didn't just destroy worlds, it left entire star systems uninhabitable for thousands of years. Can he actually do that? President Martinez asked over the emergency communication link from Washington. Yes, YAGA replied grimly. And the weapon exists specifically for situations like this. When the hegemony cannot control a world, they ensure no one else can have it either. Time to impact? Asked General Morrison. The charges must be delivered to the star's core. With current fleet positioning, approximately 43 minutes. Marcus felt the familiar sensation of everything clicking into place that he'd learned to associate with humanity's greatest moments. It was the same feeling he'd had when he'd decided to help a dying alien in his field, when he'd refused to let her sacrifice herself, when he'd suggested fighting the system instead of the fleet. What if we don't stop the charges? He said suddenly. The entire command center went silent. Marcus, YAGA said carefully, if those charges reach the sun, what if we let them reach the sun but change what they do when they get there? Dr. Kim caught on first, her eyes widening. The molecular manipulation techniques. If we could modify the charges in flight, turn a weapon of destruction into a tool of creation, Marcus finished. YAGA, could your abilities reach that far? Not alone, but with the network effect. Her cosmic gaze grew thoughtful. It would require every aberrant in the system working together. And it would require human tactical coordination beyond anything attempted before. What exactly are you proposing? President Martinez asked. We're proposing, Marcus said, to turn the hegemony's ultimate weapon into a gift to the galaxy. What followed was the most audacious gambit in the history of warfare. Instead of trying to intercept the quantum demolition charges racing toward Earth's sun, the combined human-alien fleet began a coordinated effort to modify them using shared aberrant abilities guided by human tactical innovation. The charges, designed to destabilize stellar matter, were gradually transformed into something unprecedented. Quantum enhancement devices that would turn Sol into a broadcast beacon capable of carrying signals across the entire galaxy instantaneously. You are attempting to weaponize a star, Vorthak observed with something approaching admiration. We're attempting to turn a star into a communication network, Dr. Kim corrected. The enhanced solar output will create a galaxy-wide quantum entanglement field. Every world, every ship, every being in the galaxy will be able to communicate instantaneously. The implications were staggering. The hegemony's control depended on their monopoly of faster-than-light communication. If every world could talk to every other world instantly, the isolation that enabled totalitarian control would become impossible to maintain. Fleet Admiral Zakros, watching his weapon of ultimate destruction being transformed into an instrument of galactic liberation, made one final desperate gambit. He ordered his remaining ships to ram Earth directly, hoping to at least eliminate the source of the revolution, even if he couldn't destroy the star system. He hadn't counted on the fact that humans don't fight alone. The ramming attack was met by a defensive formation unlike anything seen in galactic military history. Human ships crewed by mixed human-alien teams fought alongside refugee vessels operated by beings from dozens of worlds. The battle network that had developed during the fighting now encompassed every conscious being in the solar system, creating a collective intelligence that could anticipate and counter every hegemony move before it was fully formed. Zakros's flagship, the Eternal Order, broke through the outer defenses and began its final dive toward Earth. Marcus watched from his command bunker as the massive vessel, larger than most cities, descended through Earth's atmosphere, trailing fire and debris. "It's going to hit somewhere in the Pacific," General Morrison reported. "Impact in 12 minutes. "Can we stop it?" President Martinez asked. "We can do better than stop it," YAGA said suddenly. Her form began to glow with an inner light that made the air around her hum with power. "We can save it." What happened next became legend throughout the galaxy. As the Eternal Order plummeted toward Earth's surface, every aberrant in the system, and hundreds of humans who had never suspected they possessed such abilities, combined their powers in a coordinated effort guided by the battle network. The ship didn't crash, it landed. Gently, despite weighing millions of tons and traveling at terminal velocity. Molecular manipulation slowed its descent. Gravity control cushioned its impact. Most incredibly, temporal manipulation actually reversed the damage it had sustained during its suicidal plunge. Fleet Admiral Zakros found himself sitting in an intact ship on the floor of what had moments before been empty ocean, surrounded by rescue vessels crewed by the same beings he had been trying to exterminate. Marcus was among the first humans to board the Hegemony flagship. He found Zakros in his command chamber staring at displays that showed the impossible. His weapon of ultimate destruction had successfully enhanced Earth's sun, and the quantum entanglement field was already spreading across the galaxy. "This is not how wars end," Zakros said, his voice hollow with shock. "This is how wars end when one side refuses to think of the other as an enemy," Marcus replied. "You're not our prisoner, Admiral. You're our guest. And when you're ready, you're welcome to help us figure out what comes next." The quantum entanglement field reached the galactic core 7 hours later. The effect was immediate and transformative. Worlds that had been isolated for millennia could suddenly communicate with each other directly. Populations that had been controlled through censorship and information restriction suddenly had access to the truth about their history and their potential. The hegemony's response was swift and predictable. They ordered all loyal fleets to converge on Earth for a final assault that would eliminate the source of the galactic revolution once and for all. The response from the galaxy was equally swift and far more surprising. Instead of a few dozen refugee ships and defecting vessels, Earth found itself protected by the largest fleet in galactic history. Thousands of ships from hundreds of worlds, crewed by beings who had decided that freedom was worth fighting for. But more importantly, they weren't coming to fight a war. They were coming to build a future. "This is Captain Tavara of the Centauri Independence Fleet," came one transmission among thousands. "We're not here to fight the hegemony. We're here to replace it." The revolution that followed wasn't a war in any traditional sense. It was a transformation. World after world simply stopped acknowledging hegemony authority. Fleet after fleet defected to join what was becoming known as the Free Galaxy Coalition. Most significantly, being after being began demonstrating abilities that the hegemony had convinced them they didn't possess. The hegemony's greatest weapon was convincing the galaxy that its citizens were powerless without them, YAGA explained to Marcus as they watched the streams of ships arriving in Earth's solar system. But every sapient species has aberrant potential. They simply needed to believe it was possible. Marcus nodded, then asked the question that had been bothering him for days. What happens to Earth now? We started this whole thing, but we're still the newest members of galactic civilization. Earth becomes what it has always been, YAGA replied. A refuge for those who need help and a source of hope for those who have lost it. The formal end of the Galactic War came 6 months later, not with a surrender or a peace treaty, but with a celebration. The last hegemony stronghold had been liberated not through force but through education. The defenders had simply learned the truth about their history and decided they wanted something better. Marcus stood on his porch, watching ships from across the galaxy landing in the fields around his ranch. His property had become the unofficial embassy for the Free Galaxy Coalition, mostly because nobody could think of a good reason to move the headquarters away from the place where it all started. Regrets? YAGA asked, settling beside him. She was learning to modulate her size using molecular manipulation, and today she was only about 8 feet tall, still massive by human standards, but small enough to fit on his furniture. About answering that mail-order bride ad? Marcus grinned. I got the love of my life, helped start a galactic revolution, and turned my ranch into the most important piece of real estate in the universe. I'd say it worked out pretty well. And the future? Are you ready to help build a new kind of galactic civilization? Marcus looked out at the ships landing in his fields, carrying refugees and explorers and revolutionaries from across the galaxy. He thought about everything that had changed since that night, when he drunkenly decided that loneliness was worse than the risk of cosmic-scale embarrassment. I figure, he said, if humanity is good at anything, it's adapting to impossible situations and making them work somehow. YAGA's laugh was warm and full of promise. Then the galaxy is in excellent hands. The Free Galaxy Coalition's first official act was to establish the Universal Refugee Protection Protocol, guaranteeing sanctuary for any being fleeing persecution for their abilities or beliefs. The second was to create the Galactic Information Commons, ensuring that no world could ever again be controlled through ignorance or isolation. The third act was to officially designate Earth as a sanctuary world, where any being could come to heal, learn, and discover their true potential. Earth had started as humanity's home. It had become the galaxy's hope. And in a farmhouse in Montana, a divorced rancher and a 12-foot-tall alien witch sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that had never been seen before the quantum enhancement of Sol had enriched the spectrum of light reaching Earth. Behind them, refugees from 1,000 worlds worked alongside humans to build something that had never existed before, a civilization based not on control or conquest, but on cooperation and growth. You know, Marcus said as alien children played in his yard alongside human kids, their laughter creating harmonies that no single species could achieve alone, I think we're going to like what comes next. YAGA's smile could have lit stars. We are going to build what comes next. And across the galaxy, on worlds that had forgotten what freedom felt like, and in the depths of space where new civilizations were taking their first steps toward the stars, beings looked up at the enhanced light of Earth's sun and felt something they had thought was lost forever. Hope. The mail-order alien bride who had arrived injured and desperate had become the catalyst for the greatest transformation in galactic history. The lonesome human who had helped her had become the unlikely architect of a new age. And the love that had grown between them had become the foundation for a civilization that would span the stars and endure for eons. A civilization built on the radical idea that helping strangers was not a crime, that growth was not a sin, and that the future belonged to everyone brave enough to reach for it. In the end, it wasn't humanity's technology that changed the galaxy. It wasn't their military prowess or their diplomatic skill. It was their stubborn refusal to give up on hope and their instinctive belief that everyone deserved a chance to be free. The hegemony had ruled through fear and stagnation for 10,000 years. The Free Galaxy Coalition would build through hope and growth for the next 10,000. And it all started with a drunk man in Montana who decided that loneliness was worse than cosmic embarrassment, and an ancient alien witch who learned that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is someone who cares enough to help. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly the point.